Some investigations end with answers. The evidence is collected. The facts are documented. A conclusion is reached. The case is closed. I'm Marcus Webb. For over 20 years, I've covered criminal investigations as a journalist. This is Unresolved Years. Early in my career at the Washington Post, I spent time in the archives reviewing closed files. Cases that have been put to rest years, sometimes decades, earlier. Most were straightforward. A crime occurred. An investigation followed. A conclusion was reached. But some files felt incomplete. Not because the investigation had failed, but because the case had been closed around a single determination: how something happened, while leaving a larger question unaddressed. I remember thinking, a case can be officially resolved and still fundamentally unresolved. That tension between institutional closure and persistent mystery is what this channel examines. On the evening of June 3rd, 1995, a security guard at the Oslo Plaza Hotel entered room 2805. He had been sent to address an unpaid bill. The guest had not checked out. There had been no response to calls or knocks. He used his master key. Inside, he found a woman lying on the bed. There was a gunshot wound to her head. A gun was in her right hand. He immediately left the room and called the police. Oslo police arrived. The scene was assessed. The evidence was documented. An autopsy was conducted. Within days, a determination was made. Probable suicide. The case was investigated. Fingerprints were taken. Databases were checked. Missing persons reports were reviewed. No match was found. By 1996, the case was closed. The woman was buried. The file was archived. The official conclusion was recorded: a suicide. An unidentified woman. No further action required. 29 years have passed. The woman's identity has never been established. No one reported her missing. No family came forward. No name was ever connected to the body found in that hotel room. The case was closed, but the question was not answered. This is the Oslo Plaza woman. A death explained. An identity that remains a mystery. To understand how this case unfolded and how it was investigated, it helps to understand where and when it happened. Oslo, in 1995, was the capital of Norway, a modern European city. Population approximately 500,000. Politically stable. Economically developed. Norway had been a NATO member since 1949, but by the mid-90s, the Cold War had ended. The Berlin Wall had fallen 6 years earlier. The Soviet Union had dissolved. This was a different Europe than the one that existed 20 years prior. The Oslo Plaza Hotel sat in the center of the city. It was, and remains, a luxury hotel. 27 floors. Over 600 rooms. Located near the Central Railway Station and the government district. It was the kind of hotel where business travelers stayed. Diplomats. Corporate executives. Tourists with money. The rooms were expensive. The clientele was international. In 1995, the world operated differently than it does now. There was no social media. No smartphones. No digital footprint that followed a person everywhere they went. Security cameras existed, but they were not ubiquitous. Hotels had them in lobbies, sometimes in hallways. But coverage was limited. Footage was recorded on tapes that were reused. If an incident wasn't flagged immediately, the footage could be gone within days. Identification worked differently. When someone checked into a hotel, they provided a name and an address. In theory, they were supposed to show identification. In practice, enforcement varied. If a guest seemed credible, if they dressed well, if they spoke confidently, desk staff often did not press for documentation, especially if the guest said they would settle the bill later. Credit cards were standard by 1995, but not universal. It was not unusual for a guest to say they would provide payment details later, particularly if they were checking in late at night. Database systems were developing, but they were not what they are today. Fingerprints could be checked against national criminal databases. Interpol maintained international records, but the process was slow. Manual. Results took time. DNA profiling existed. It had been used in criminal cases since the late 1980s. But DNA databases were still being built. There was no widespread civilian database. No genetic genealogy. The infrastructure that exists now did not exist then. If someone went missing, their family filed a report with local police. That report entered a local system. It might be shared with national authorities. It might be forwarded to Interpol, but there was no instant, searchable global database. Information moved slowly. Travel in Europe was also changing. The Schengen Agreement, which allowed free movement across much of Europe without border checks, was in the process of being implemented. By 1995, several countries had signed on. Border controls between these countries were being reduced or eliminated. This made travel easier. It also made tracking movement more difficult. A person could move between Germany, Belgium, the Netherlands, France, and Scandinavia without showing a passport at every border. There were fewer checkpoints, fewer records, fewer opportunities to verify identity. None of this suggests what happened in this case. It simply describes the environment in which the case occurred. In 1995, it was possible to travel under a false name, to check into a hotel without showing identification, to move between countries without leaving a clear trail, to exist for a period of time without creating the kind of digital record that would be nearly impossible to avoid today. Whether that is what happened here, whether someone deliberately exploited these conditions, is not established by the evidence. But the conditions existed, and the case unfolded within them. On the night of May 31st, 1995, a woman walked into the Oslo Plaza Hotel. The time was 10:44 p.m. She approached the reception desk. She said she needed a room. The desk clerk began the check-in process. Name? Jennifer Fairgate. Address? Rue de la Stade, 148. Verlaine, Belgium. Postal code 7968. Date of birth? August 23rd, 1973. That would make her 21 years old. The clerk asked if she was traveling alone. She said no. She said she was traveling with someone named Lois Fairgate. The clerk noted this on the registration form. 2 guests. 1 room. The woman was assigned room 2805. 28th floor. A deluxe suite. The nightly rate was 1,845 Norwegian kroner. Expensive. The clerk asked for a credit card to secure the booking. The woman said she would provide payment details later. This was unusual. Hotel policy typically required a credit card imprint at check-in. But it was late. The woman seemed composed. Well-dressed. The clerk allowed it. No credit card imprint was taken. The woman had luggage with her. She took her room key and went upstairs. The registration was complete. Later, when investigators examined the details she had provided, they found inconsistencies. The address in Belgium did not exist. There is no Rue de la Stade in Verlaine. There is no such street anywhere in Belgium. The postal code, 7968, is not a valid Belgian postal code. Verlaine is a real town, but the address was fabricated. The name Jennifer Fairgate has never been connected to any missing person report. Not in Belgium. Not anywhere. The companion, Lois Fairgate, was never seen by any staff member at the hotel. Not at check-in. Not during the stay. Not any point. Whether this person existed or was simply a name on a form is unknown. Over the next 2 days, the woman was observed in the hotel on several occasions. She was always alone. Staff members saw her in the corridors, in the lobby, moving between the elevators and her room. She did not socialize. She did not sit in the hotel restaurant or bar for extended periods. She was polite when she interacted with staff, but she did not engage in conversation. No one saw her with another person. On the evening of June 2nd, at 8:23 p.m., room service was ordered from room 2805. The order was simple: bratwurst with potato salad, a Coca-Cola. The order was prepared and delivered by a security guard named Evie Tudum-Jertsen. The hotel sometimes used security staff to deliver room service, particularly in the evening. Jertsen brought the tray to room 2805. She knocked. The woman answered the door. She took the tray. She thanked the staff member. She closed the door. Jertsen later told investigators the woman seemed normal, calm. There was nothing unusual about the interaction. That was the last confirmed interaction anyone had with her. Later that evening, the woman was seen in the hotel corridor near her room. The exact time is not specified in the available records, but it was described as evening. June 2nd. After that, There are no confirmed sightings. No one reported seeing her leave the hotel. No one reported seeing anyone else enter or leave room 2805. The next 24 hours are undocumented. By the afternoon of June 3rd, hotel staff noticed that the guest in room 2805 had not checked out. Checkout time had passed. The bill had not been paid. There had been no response to phone calls placed to the room. The hotel became concerned. At 7:50 p.m., a security guard named Espionage was sent to the room to check on the situation. He knocked on the door. No answer. He knocked again. Still no answer. He used his master key to unlock the door. He opened it. Inside, he saw the woman lying on the bed. There was blood. A lot of blood. There was a gunshot wound to her head. A gun was in her right hand. Naz immediately backed out of the room. He closed the door. He went downstairs and called the police. Oslo police arrived quickly. The scene was secured. Forensic teams were called. The woman was dead. That much was clear. The preliminary assessment, based on the position of the body and the presence of the weapon, was that this appeared to be a suicide. The body was on the bed. She was partially clothed. The gunshot wound was to the head. Entry wound at the forehead. The damage was severe. The weapon was a Browning 9mm pistol. Model, Browning FN-HP. A semi-automatic handgun. It was in her right hand. When investigators examined the weapon, they found that the serial number had been filed off, removed. This made it impossible to trace the gun's origin or ownership. The room was searched thoroughly. 2 bags were present. Luggage. Inside, investigators found clothing, toiletries, personal items. Every piece of clothing had the manufacturer labels removed. Not torn off. Cut out. Carefully. Systematically. The brands could not be determined. The origin of the clothing could not be traced. In the room, there was cash. The exact amount has not been disclosed in public records, but money was present. There was jewelry, a watch, rings, items of value. But there were also notable absences. No passport, no driver's license, no credit cards, no identification of any kind, no personal papers, no letters, no address book, no receipts, no travel documents, no photographs, no keys, not car keys, not house keys, nothing. It was as if the woman had arrived with only the essentials needed for a brief stay and nothing that could identify her. The room door was locked. The security lock, the kind of lock that can only be engaged from inside the room, was in place. This detail was significant. It suggested that no one else had been in the room when she died, or at least that whoever had been there had engaged the lock before leaving, which would require access and knowledge of how to do so. The forensic team documented everything. Photographs were taken. Evidence was collected. The body was transported for autopsy. The investigation had begun. But even at this early stage, a pattern was visible. A woman staying under a false name at a luxury hotel with no identification, with all clothing labels removed, with a weapon that could not be traced. And no one, anywhere, had reported her missing. By early 1996, the Oslo police had completed their investigation. The official determination was that the death was likely suicide. The conclusion was based on several factors documented in the case file. First, the gunshot wound. The autopsy, conducted at the Norwegian Institute of Public Health, determined that the wound was consistent with self-infliction. The trajectory of the bullet, the angle, the entry point on the forehead. The medical evidence supported the possibility that the woman had fired the weapon herself. Second, the gun was found in her right hand. It was a Browning 9mm semi-automatic pistol. The serial number had been filed off, making it untraceable. But the weapon was there, in her hand, when the security guard entered the room. Third, the room was locked from the inside. The security lock had been engaged. Hotel staff confirmed that this lock could only be activated from within the room. There was no sign of forced entry. No indication that the door had been tampered with. Fourth, there were no signs of a struggle. The room was orderly. The woman's belongings were in place. There were no defensive wounds on her body. No marks suggesting restraint or physical conflict. Fifth, there was no evidence that another person had been present at the time of death. No witness reported seeing anyone enter or leave the room. No forensic evidence pointed to a second individual. The autopsy provided additional details. The woman was estimated to be between 23 and 30 years old, approximately 164 centimeters tall. She had short, dark hair. Her physical condition suggested she had been healthy prior to death. The cause of death was the gunshot wound to the head. The trauma was severe. Death would have been rapid. The time of death was more difficult to establish with precision. Based on the condition of the body when it was discovered, investigators estimated she had died sometime between the evening of June 2nd and the early hours of June 3rd. The exact moment could not be determined. Fingerprints were taken from the body and submitted to databases. They were checked against Norwegian criminal records. No match. They were checked against Norwegian civil records. No match. They were submitted to Interpol. No match. Dental records were analyzed by forensic odontologists. The dental work suggested European origin. The techniques used were common in Germany and Belgium during the 1970s and 80s. But no specific match was found in missing persons dental databases. Missing persons reports were searched. Norwegian authorities checked domestic records. No one matching her description had been reported missing in Norway. Interpol coordinated searches across Europe. No matching missing persons report was found in any member country. No one came forward to identify her. No family, no employer, no acquaintance. The woman remained unidentified. By 1996, the case was closed. The official classification was probable suicide of an unidentified person. The reasoning was documented. The evidence supported the conclusion. There was no indication of criminal activity by another party. There was no suspect to pursue. There was no ongoing threat to public safety. The woman's body was buried in a cemetery in Bergen, Norway. The grave was marked, but not with a name. She was recorded as unidentified. The case file was archived. No further investigative action was planned. This was the official conclusion, reached through standard procedure, documented in the record, accepted by the institution. The case was closed. The official conclusion addressed how the woman died. The gunshot wound, the weapon, the medical evidence, the determination that the death was consistent with suicide. This was documented. This was explained. But the conclusion did not address something else. Who was she? And why had she concealed her identity so thoroughly? The name she used at the hotel, Jennifer Fairgate, was false. The address she provided, Rue de la Stade, 148, 7968 Verlaine, Belgium, did not exist. There is no Rue de la Stade in Belgium. 7968 is not a valid Belgian postal code. The address was fabricated. This was not a mistake. This was not a misremembered street name or transposed number. The entire address was constructed from components that do not correspond to any real location. Her clothing told the same story. Every item in her luggage had the manufacturer labels removed, not torn out carelessly, cut out, systematically, in advance. Investigators documented this. Shirts, pants, undergarments. Every piece of clothing had been altered to remove identifying information. This requires preparation. This requires intent. No identification documents were found in the room. No passport. No driver's license. No credit cards. No business cards. No receipts with a name. No photographs. No address book. No keys to a home or a car. Nothing that could establish who she was or where she came from. The gun found in her hand had its serial number filed off. This made it untraceable. The weapon could not be connected to a manufacturer's records, a sale, a registration, or a previous owner. She had checked into an expensive hotel suite, 1,845 Norwegian kroner per night, a significant amount in 1995, but she provided no credit card. She said she would pay later. The hotel accepted this, and then she never did pay. For someone supposedly planning to end their life, she went to considerable lengths to prevent identification. And yet, no one reported her missing. Not in Norway, not in Germany, not in Belgium, not anywhere in Europe. Her fingerprints were in no database. Her dental records matched no missing persons report. Her physical description generated no leads. It was as if she had not existed before checking into that hotel on May 31st. This pattern was not unique. 25 years earlier, in 1970, another unidentified woman was found dead in Norway, near Bergen, in a place called Isdalen or Ice Valley. She had also traveled under false names. She had also removed all the labels from her clothing. She had also carried no identification. She was also found with evidence suggesting suicide, burned passports, sleeping pills, petrol used as an accelerant. Her case was also closed. She was also buried unidentified. And 25 years later, she was also reopened when modern forensic techniques became available. She is still unidentified. The similarities are notable. Both women in Norway. Both using false identities. Both with systematic removal of identifying information. Both cases closed as probable suicide. Both women never reported missing. This does not prove a connection, but it establishes a pattern. The question the official file does not answer is, why? Why would someone planning to take their own life go to these lengths? Removing clothing labels takes time. Fabricating an address requires thought. Traveling without identification is deliberate. Filing off a gun serial number is purposeful. These are not the actions of someone in a sudden crisis. These are not impulsive decisions. These are preparations. The official conclusion in 1996 was suicide. The evidence at the scene supported that determination. But the evidence in the luggage, the evidence in the hotel registration, the evidence in the absence of any identification, that evidence suggested something the official file did not explore. Not who killed her. There was no indication of another person, but who she was, and why she had worked so hard to make sure no one could find out. The case was closed. The file was archived. The question remained. To understand what is known and what is not, it helps to look at the timeline. May 31st, 1995, 10:44 p.m. A woman walked into the Oslo Plaza Hotel and checked in under the name Jennifer Fairgate. She was assigned room 2805 on the 28th floor. She provided a fabricated address in Belgium. She said she would pay by credit card later. No credit card was presented. The hotel accepted this arrangement. She carried luggage to her room. The registration form listed a companion. The name given was Lois Fairgate, the same last name. But no hotel staff member ever reported seeing this person. Not a check-in, not in the lobby, not in the corridors, not in the room. Whether this person existed, arrived separately, or was entirely fabricated is unknown. June 1st and 2nd. The woman was observed by hotel staff on multiple occasions during this period. She was always alone. Her behavior was described as normal. Unremarkable. She did not draw attention. She did not appear distressed. June 2nd, 8:23 p.m. She ordered room service. Bratwurst with potato salad. A Coca-Cola. The order was delivered by a security guard named Evie Tudemjertsen. The woman answered the door. She took the tray. She closed the door. The interaction was brief and ordinary. This was the last confirmed sighting of her alive. June 2nd, evening. At some point after the room service delivery, she was seen in the hotel corridor near her room. The exact time is not specified in the available records, but it was evening. She was alone. After that, there are no confirmed sightings. Between the evening of June 2nd and the evening of June 3rd, the timeline goes blank. Investigators estimated the time of death as occurring sometime during this window. The condition of the body when it was discovered suggested she had been dead for approximately 20 to 24 hours. But the exact time could not be determined with precision. What happened during those hours is not documented. No hotel staff reported hearing anything unusual from room 2805. No gunshot was reported. No disturbance. No noise that attracted attention. This is not necessarily surprising. The Oslo Plaza Hotel was a large building, 27 floors, over 600 rooms, thick walls, background noise from the city. A single gunshot in a room on the 28th floor might not have been heard, or if it was heard, it might have been dismissed as something else. A door slamming, a car backfiring outside, something not worth investigating. But it means there is no precise record of when the shot was fired. No witnesses reported seeing anyone enter or leave room 2805 during this period. The hotel had security cameras, but coverage was limited. In 1995, cameras were expensive. Footage was recorded on tapes that were reused. The hotel had cameras in the main lobby, possibly in some hallways, but not everywhere, not on every floor, not outside every room. If footage existed that showed the 28th floor corridor during the relevant time period, it was not preserved. Either it was not reviewed immediately, and the tape was reused, or the cameras did not cover that area. This was a limitation of the technology available at the time. June 3rd, 7:50 p.m. The security guard, Espionage, was sent to room 2805 to address the unpaid bill. The woman had not checked out. There had been no response to attempts to contact her. He knocked. No answer. He used his master key and entered the room. He found her body on the bed. He immediately left and called the police. The timeline then is this. May 31st, 10:44 p.m., check-in. June 1st through 2nd, observed in hotel. Normal behavior. Alone. June 2nd, 8:23 p.m., room service delivered. Last confirmed interaction. June 2nd, evening, last confirmed sighting. June 2nd or 3rd, overnight, time of death. Estimated, not precise. June 3rd, 7:50 p.m., body discovered. Between the last sighting and the discovery, approximately 20 to 24 hours passed. During that window, something happened, but there is no witness to it. No camera footage, no audio recording, no documentation. There is only the result. The timeline shows what could be confirmed. It also shows the gaps. What occurred in that hotel room during those hours is not known. What is known is that when the door was opened on the evening of June 3rd, the woman was dead, and no one had reported hearing anything that might explain when or how it happened. The documented behavior allows for analysis, not of motive, not of identity, but of pattern and capability. What the evidence shows is a series of deliberate actions. She used a false identity, the name Jennifer Fairgate, the fabricated address in Belgium. These were not mistakes. These were choices. She removed all the labels from her clothing, every item. This was done in advance, before she arrived at the hotel. It required time. It required intent. She brought no identification documents, no passport, no driver's license, no credit cards, no papers of any kind that could reveal who she was. The gun had its serial number filed off. This made it untraceable. Someone had to do that. Either she did it herself, or someone did it for her. Either way, it was purposeful. She avoided leaving a credit card trail. She said she would pay later. She never did. This meant there was no financial record connecting her real identity to the hotel stay. These are not impulsive actions. These are not the decisions of someone in a sudden crisis. These are preparations. Several contexts could explain this behavior. One possibility is professional training in operational security, intelligence work, corporate espionage, activities where anonymity is necessary, where leaving a trail is dangerous. The behavior is consistent with that kind of training, but there is no evidence that definitively establishes this. No intelligence agency has ever acknowledged her. No operation has been connected to her presence in Oslo. This remains a possibility, not a conclusion. Another possibility is flight from a threatening situation. Someone fleeing an abusive relationship. Someone running from a criminal organization. Someone who believed their life was in danger and needed to disappear. The operational security would make sense in that context. The false identity, the removed labels, the lack of documents, all of it could serve as protection. But again, there is no evidence that confirms this. No one reported her missing. No one came forward to say they had been searching for her. If she was fleeing, she succeeded in vanishing entirely. A third possibility is involvement in an activity that required discretion. Not necessarily illegal, not necessarily dangerous, but something that demanded she not be identified. The nature of that activity is unknown. A fourth possibility is a psychological condition involving identity concealment. Dissociation, paranoia, a mental state where concealing one's identity felt necessary, even if no actual threat existed. The behavior could reflect a deeply held belief that she needed to be anonymous. Whether that belief was based on reality or not cannot be determined from the evidence. Each of these explanations is possible. None is proven. What can be stated is this: the behavior was neither spontaneous nor disorganized. It was systematic, planned, executed with consistency. The question is why? And that question was not the focus of the 1995 investigation. The focus was on the manner of death, how she died, the medical evidence, the scene, the determination of suicide. That question was answered. The ruling was suicide. The case was closed. The identity question remained, but it did not prevent closure. This is standard procedure. When a death is ruled suicide and there is no evidence of criminal activity by another party, the case is resolved. The file is archived. Resources are directed to active investigations, to crimes with suspects, to cases where ongoing work might produce results. An unidentified suicide does not generate the same institutional response as an unsolved homicide. There is no suspect to pursue, no family pressing for answers, no public safety concern that requires continued attention. In 1995, international coordination on cases like this was limited. Interpol could be contacted, databases could be checked, but the process was slow. If initial searches produced no match, there was no mechanism for sustained international inquiry. The case was investigated within the scope and resources available at the time. The conclusion was documented. The file was closed. This is not negligence. This is how systems function. Priorities are set. Resources are allocated. Decisions are made about which cases receive ongoing attention and which do not. The Oslo Plaza woman case was closed because the central question, how she died, had been answered. The other question, who she was, remained, but was not pursued further. 29 years later, that question is still unanswered. The behavior suggests systematic preparation. The identity concealment was successful, and the investigation, conducted within the standards of 1995, determined the cause of death but not the identity or motive of the person who died. The 1995 investigation was thorough in certain areas. The scene was documented. The autopsy was conducted. Fingerprints were taken. Databases were checked. But there were elements that were not pursued further. This is not unusual. Every investigation has limits. Resources are finite. Decisions are made about which lines of inquiry to follow and which to set aside. In this case, several questions were noted but not explored in depth. First, the source of the false identification. How did she obtain documents under the name Jennifer Fairgate? Were they professionally forged, purchased, self-created? The investigation file does not contain analysis of this question. Second, why no missing persons report was filed anywhere in Europe? Someone knew this woman. She had a life before May 31st, 1995. She had a home, possibly a job, possibly family or friends. Yet no one reported her missing. The investigation did not pursue why this absence of a report might have occurred. Third, the clothing labels. All had been removed, but the clothing itself could have been analyzed. The fabric, the cut, the style. European clothing manufacturers often have regional characteristics. A detailed analysis might have narrowed the geographic origin. This was not done, or if it was, the results were not made public. Fourth, international coordination. Interpol was contacted. Databases were checked. But there is no indication of sustained coordination with police agencies in Germany, Belgium, or other European countries. No joint investigation. No systematic canvassing of hotels in other cities to see if the name Jennifer Fairgate or similar names have been used elsewhere. Fifth, the hotel companion. The registration listed Lois Fairgate. No staff member ever saw this person. Was the name checked against any records? Was there any attempt to determine if someone by that name existed? The file does not indicate follow-up on this question. Sixth, a witness report. According to some accounts, a man was seen leaving the hotel area around the estimated time of death. The description was vague. No sketch was made. No detailed follow-up interview was conducted. Whether this was investigated thoroughly or dismissed as coincidental is unclear. Seventh, gunpowder residue. Early reports indicated that tests were conducted to determine if gunpowder residue was present on the woman's hands. The results of these tests are disputed. Some sources claim no residue was found. Others suggest the testing was inconclusive or improperly conducted. The official file has not clarified this discrepancy publicly. There are also limitations in evidence handling. Hotel security footage, if it existed, was not retained long-term. In 1995, surveillance tapes were expensive. They were reused. If footage was not flagged as important immediately, it could be overwritten within days. By the time the case was classified and archived, any footage that might have existed was likely gone. Forensic testing was limited by the technology of the time. DNA profiling existed, but DNA databases were not widely established. There is no database of civilian DNA to compare against. Genetic genealogy, which has solved many cold cases in recent years, did not exist as a technique. Isotope analysis, which can determine geographic origin based on the chemical composition of teeth and bones, was a research tool in 1995. It was not a standard part of criminal investigations. The technology existed, but it was not applied. The scope of the investigation remained primarily local. Oslo police handled the case. Norwegian authorities checked Norwegian records. Interpol facilitated international database queries. But there was no extended international investigation. No team assembled from multiple countries. No coordination beyond the standard protocols. The focus was on determining the manner of death. Suicide or homicide? That question was answered. Suicide. The question of identity was secondary. It remained unresolved, but it did not prevent the case from being closed. There is no indication in the public record that intelligence agencies were consulted. If such consultation occurred, it was not documented in materials that have been made public. Why do these gaps exist? Because this was a suicide case. Standard procedure for suicide cases does not require the same level of investigation as a homicide. There is no suspect to pursue, no criminal to apprehend, no ongoing threat, because there was no identified victim, no family pressing for answers, no one was standing to demand further action, no public pressure to keep the case active, because of technological limitations. In 1995, the tools that exist now did not exist then. DNA databases were minimal. Isotope analysis was not standard. Digital records were sparse. Investigators worked with the tools available to them. And because resources are allocated to active cases, to investigations where ongoing work might produce results. An unidentified suicide, with no leads and no family, does not receive the same priority as an active homicide or a missing person with a known identity. These are the realities of how investigative systems function. Not failures, not negligence, just the procedural decisions that shape which cases receive sustained attention and which do not. The elements that were not explored in 1995 remained unexplored for 2 decades, until the case was reopened. 1996 to 2016, 20 years. During that time, the case remained closed. The file sat in the Oslo police archives. The woman remained buried in Bergen, unidentified. Her grave was marked, but not with a name, just a designation, Plaza Woman. For 20 years, several things did not happen. No family came forward to identify her. No one filed a missing persons report that matched her description. No one claimed her as a daughter, a sister, a friend. No new evidence emerged. No witness came forward years later with information. No document surfaced that shed light on her identity. No intelligence agency, in Norway or elsewhere, released information connecting her to any known operation or personnel. No government acknowledged her. No foreign government made inquiries about the case. No diplomatic channel was open to pursue identification. The case was largely forgotten. Outside of Norway, almost no one knew about it. Even within Norway, it faded from public attention. A closed case, an unidentified woman, a file in an archive. This silence is significant, but it is not necessarily mysterious. There are reasons why cases like this remain closed for decades. First, the classification of the death as suicide. Suicide is a conclusion. It answers the question of how someone died. In investigative terms, it resolves the case. There is no suspect to pursue. no criminal to apprehend, no ongoing threat to public safety. Once a death is classified as suicide, institutional resources move to active cases. Unsolved homicides, missing persons, crimes with identifiable victims and potential suspects. This is not neglect. It is allocation. Police departments operate with finite resources. Time, personnel, budget, priorities must be set. A closed suicide case does not typically receive ongoing attention unless there is new evidence or a specific reason to revisit it. Second, there was no identified victim. When someone dies and their identity is known, their family has standing to pursue answers, to request further investigation, to challenge conclusions, to keep public attention on the case. In this case, there was no family. No one knew who she was. No one could advocate for her. No one had the personal connection that drives sustained inquiry. This is not uncommon in cases involving unidentified individuals. Without a family, without a name, a case can fade into archives more easily. Third, institutional systems are designed to handle active cases, not historical ones. Closed cases are archived. They are preserved in case new information emerges, but they are not actively reviewed. Detectives work on current investigations. Resources go where they are most needed in the present. This is standard procedure. It is how law enforcement systems function. Closed cases generally remain closed unless one of several things happens. New evidence is discovered. A witness comes forward. Technological advances make reanalysis possible. Public pressure or media attention creates momentum for reopening. For 20 years, none of those factors were present in this case. Then, in 2016, something changed. VG, Verdens Gang, Norway's largest newspaper, began an investigation. Journalists examined the archive case file. They interviewed former investigators. They reviewed the evidence. They traced the timeline. They asked questions that had not been asked publicly in 20 years. They published an extensive series of articles. The Plaza Woman. Who was she? Why had the case been closed so quickly? What had been explored? What had been left unexplored? The series generated significant public interest. In Norway and beyond, people began discussing the case. Online forums picked it up. True crime communities examined the details. Comparisons were drawn to another case. The Oslo Woman, 1970. Bergen, Norway. Also unidentified. Also found with evidence suggesting suicide. Also traveled under false names. Also had clothing labels removed. Also never reported missing. That case had been reopened in 2017 after similar media attention. Modern forensic techniques had been applied. The woman was still unidentified, but the investigation was active again. The question was raised, should the Plaza Woman case be reopened as well? In 2017, the Oslo police made the decision. The case was officially reopened. It was assigned to the cold case unit. Modern forensic techniques were now available. Techniques that did not exist or were not practical in 1995. What had changed? Public pressure. The media coverage had created momentum. Questions had been raised that the public wanted answered. Advances in forensic science. Isotope analysis could now determine geographic origin. DNA databases had expanded significantly. Genetic genealogy had become a tool for solving cold cases. These capabilities had not been available in 1995. Growing international interest in true crime. Cases that might have remained obscure were now being examined by global audiences. Online communities, podcasts, documentaries. This attention created pressure on institutions to revisit old cases. The reopening was not an admission that the 1995 investigation had been inadequate. It was a response to new capabilities. Tools that did not exist before now existed. Questions that could not be answered in 1995 might be answerable now. The case moved from the archive back to active status. 20 years of silence had ended. Since the case was reopened in 2017, modern forensic techniques have been applied. Techniques that did not exist or were not practical in 1995. Isotope analysis was conducted in 2016 and 2017. This technique examines the chemical composition of teeth and bones. Different regions have different isotopic signatures based on water sources, diet, and environmental factors. These signatures are absorbed into the body during childhood and adolescence. They remain in the teeth and bones for life. The analysis was performed on samples from the Plaza woman's remains. The results suggested she likely originated in Germany, Belgium, or Central or Eastern Europe. The isotopic signature was consistent with someone who had spent their formative years in that geographic region. This narrowed the possibilities. It provided more information than was available in 1995, but it did not provide an identity. It indicated a region, not a country, not a city, not a name. DNA analysis was also conducted. A sample was extracted from the remains. A DNA profile was created. That profile was entered into national and international databases. It was checked against missing persons records, against criminal databases, against genealogical databases where individuals have voluntarily submitted their DNA. No matches were found. No familial connections were identified. No distant relatives. No genetic links that could be traced backward to establish identity. The DNA exists. It is available for comparison. But as of now, it has not led to identification. Modern investigative capabilities have expanded significantly since 1995. Missing persons databases are now international and digitally searchable. Information that once took weeks to share between countries can now be accessed in seconds. Cooperation between law enforcement agencies across Europe is more systematic. Protocols exist for sharing information. Joint investigations are more common. Digital records have transformed how identity is traced. In 1995, if someone did not appear in a paper file, they were difficult to find. Now, digital footprints are pervasive. Travel records, financial transactions, social media, email, phone records. If this case had occurred today, the investigation would be different. International coordination would be immediate. European police agencies would be involved from the start. The case would be treated as cross-border from the beginning. Genetic genealogy would be employed. This technique, developed after 2010, uses DNA to identify distant relatives. Third cousins, fourth cousins, people who share a common ancestor generations back. By building family trees from these connections, investigators can work backward to identify an unknown individual. This has solved cases that were unsolved for decades. Unidentified remains. Cold case homicides. It is now a standard tool. Enhanced forensic analysis would be applied. Facial reconstruction using modern imaging technology. Analysis of trace evidence with techniques that did not exist in the 90s. Detailed examination of every item in the room. Social media and digital footprint searches would be conducted. Even if someone traveled under a false name, they likely had a real identity somewhere. A job, a home, an online presence. Modern investigators would search for digital traces. International media appeals would be made, not just in Norway, across Europe, globally. Photographs, reconstructions, detailed descriptions, reaching audiences that could not have been reached in 1995. These tools have been applied to the Oslo Plaza woman case since 2017. They have provided some information. The isotope analysis gave a probable region of origin. The DNA profile is now available in databases, waiting for a match. Public attention has been renewed. Tips have been submitted from multiple countries. In 2020, the case was featured in an episode of Netflix's Unsolved mystery series. The episode reached a global audience. Millions of viewers. Tips came in from across Europe, from the United States, from Australia. People who thought they might recognize something. A detail, a description, a possibility. Each tip was reviewed. None led to identification. What modern tools have not provided is the answer. They have not revealed who she was. They have not explained why she traveled under a false identity. They have not resolved why no one, anywhere, reported her missing. The disputed forensic findings from 1995, the gunpowder residue results, have not been clarified. The original tests are contested. Retesting is not possible because the evidence no longer exists in a form that would allow it. The observation is this: improved investigative tools have expanded what is possible. They have solved many cases that seemed unsolvable, but they have not yet resolved this one. Not because the tools are inadequate, but because the information needed to make the connections is not present. DNA databases only help if a relative has submitted their DNA. Isotope analysis only narrows geography. It does not provide a name. Media coverage only works if someone recognizes the information. Digital searches only succeed if a digital trail exists. In this case, despite all the advances, the central piece of information is missing. Someone, somewhere, may know who she was. But so far, no one has come forward. The case remains open. The investigation continues. The tools are available, but the woman remains unidentified. 29 years after her body was discovered, certain questions remain unanswered. Her real name is unknown. The name she used, Jennifer Fairgate, was false. Her actual name, the one given to her at birth, has never been established. Her nationality is unknown. Isotope analysis suggests she originated in Germany, Belgium, or Central or Eastern Europe. But this is regional probability, not confirmed origin. Her nationality remains undetermined. Why she was in Oslo is unknown. She checked into a luxury hotel. She stayed for 2 days. What brought her to Norway, what her purpose was, is not established in any record. Why she used a false identity is unknown. The fabricated address, the false name, the operational security. The reason for this is not documented. Why no one reported her missing is unknown. She had a life before May 31st, 1995. She came from somewhere. She had a home, possibly family, possibly friends. Yet no missing persons report was filed. Not in Norway, not in Germany, not in Belgium, not anywhere. Whether the companion listed on the hotel registration, Lois Fairgate, ever existed is unknown. No staff member saw this person. Whether the name was real, whether someone checked in separately, or whether it was pure fabrication, is not known. Why the clothing labels were removed is unknown. This required time and intent. The purpose behind it has never been explained. The source of the false identification is unknown. How she obtained documents under the name Jennifer Fairgate, whether they were professionally forged, purchased, or created some other way. This has not been determined. Why the gun serial number was filed off is unknown. Someone removed it deliberately. Whether she did it herself or whether someone else did it for her is not established. The purpose is not documented. What occurred in the final 20 to 24 hours of her life is unknown. Between the last confirmed sighting on the evening of June 2nd and the discovery of her body on the evening of June 3rd, there is a gap. No witness, no camera footage, no record of what happened during that time. These are the questions that remain. But there is also evidence, information that is known. A DNA profile exists. It was extracted in 2017. It has been entered into national and international databases. It is available for comparison. To date, it has produced no matches, but exists. If a familial connection appears in a database, identification becomes possible. Isotope data has been analyzed. It indicates probable origins in Central or Western Europe. This is not precise, but it is informative. It narrows the geographic scope. Fingerprints were taken and are on file. They have been checked against databases multiple times. No match has been found, but the prints exist. They are preserved. Physical evidence has been maintained. The items from the hotel room, the clothing, the luggage, the gun, these items are stored. They can be re-examined as new techniques become available. Photographs and the case file are maintained. The documentation from 1995, the autopsy report, the scene photographs, the investigation records, all preserved. The case has active investigation status. It is assigned to the Oslo Police Cold Case Unit. Tips are still received. Leads are still followed when they emerge. What the evidence shows is clear. She engaged in systematic preparation for anonymity. This was not impulsive. This was planned. The false identity, the removed labels, the lack of documentation, the filed-off serial number, all of it required planning and execution. She successfully concealed her identity. 29 years later, despite modern forensic techniques, despite DNA analysis, despite international databases, despite public attention, she remains unidentified. Whatever steps she took to prevent identification worked. The official conclusion, reached in 1995, determined how she died. Gunshot wound to the head. Probable suicide. The physical evidence supported this. The medical findings were consistent. But the official conclusion did not determine who she was. It did not establish her identity. It did not explain her motive. The central question is this: how can someone die in a luxury hotel in the center of a European capital and completely vanish from all records? No missing persons report filed anywhere. No family searching for her. No paper trail leading to her real identity. No connection to a life that existed before May 31st, 1995. It is as if she did not exist before that date. As if she appeared at the Oslo Plaza Hotel with no history, no connections, no past. And then she died and disappeared again. The case is unresolved, not in the sense that the investigation failed, but in the sense that the central questions remain open. The evidence exists. The tools are available. The case file is active, but the answers are not there. She is buried in Bergen, Norway. The grave is marked, not with a name, just a designation. Plaza Woman. The Oslo Plaza Hotel still operates. It was rebranded in the years after 1995. It is now the Radisson Blu Plaza Hotel. 27 floors. Over 600 rooms. In the center of Oslo. Room 2805 still exists. It is still rented to guests. Travelers check in. They stay for a night or two. They check out. Most of them do not know what happened there in June of 1995. The case file remains open. It sits with the Oslo Police Cold Case Unit. Not archived. Active. Tips are still received. Leads are still followed when they emerge. The DNA profile is available. Stored in databases. Waiting for a match that has not come. Some mysteries persist, not because investigations failed, but because the information needed to solve them does not exist in accessible form. Or it exists, but has not been connected. Someone, somewhere, may know who she was. A family member, a former colleague, a friend from years ago, someone who knew her before May 31st, 1995. But so far, no one has come forward. The case remains open. I'm Marcus Webb. If this examination was valuable to you, I'd appreciate your subscription. It helps me continue producing in-depth journalism on cases that deserve sustained attention. If you have credible information about this case, contact details for Oslo Police are in the description below. Thank you for watching.